Hey, Corey, we're back in Creative Director Studio. How's it going?
It's good. I'm glad to be back, man. I'm glad to have these conversations with you. Yeah, I'm just super excited to dive into the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And today we wanted to build on the first video, Corey, we actually posted on this channel, which got a lot of great feedback. We're really excited about the feedback we heard. And that video was about that your design has no soul and why it's bad if your design doesn't have soul. And this is something that I think, Corey, is at the heart of really this channel and what we think is important for great design, great creativity, whatever output you're creating, we think it's important. We got some really good feedback though, Corey, from people that
We
watched the
did.
video in the community, right? And they said, how do you do it? How do we do that? We've even heard from people that aren't necessarily working in design saying, how do we do that? How do we build soul into our work? So we thought we would fire up a conversation today and talk in more detail about this. So that's what we want to talk about today, Corey. So do you want to kick us off and maybe jump into how we want to frame the conversation for today?
Yeah. So yeah, like Joey said, we've got a lot of really good, feedback. People were just really curious about how we approach this idea of bringing soul to your work. And so that conversation was long, but the whole point of that conversation was prioritizing the emotional side of design, thinking about ways to inject that into your work. And we have some ways that we personally do that. And so today we're going to go ahead and share that. Um, so to dive straight in, the most helpful thing we can say about this is to make sure that you're thinking about it up front. So when you get a brief, you're absorbing the content, you're really paying attention to the brand and looking at the things that the client has given you. That is the point where you approach the work with this storytelling mindset. So we talked about building narratives, and that's something that Joey and I do on projects, but something that he can share, I think, best because it's something I learned so much in working with him. So I think we should dive into that process of narrative and
Mhm.
maybe then unpack that, Joey.
We think about this as a story. And we talked about in the first video how people need to feel something.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that, that is a great place to start. And then you can often work back from there. And I'm really a big advocate of creating what's called the big idea. If you've worked in storytelling, maybe some of you watching actually write scripts or develop narratives in that way. It's this idea of the armature. They call it armature in storytelling, but a more common way of saying it is the big idea or the big theme. And you really need one of those to drive any specific project. And this is hard to get there, right? We've talked about branding, Corey, in the past,
Yeah.
and how you can bring branding into your own personal approach to your work. It's very true here as well. It's almost as if you're picking one core central theme that is what people should feel about this project. And you can usually, reverse engineer that from the brief. Let's say you're creating a website, because many of you are doing web design. So websites cover a lot of different types of content, right? They have components, they have all these different things going on. But the most important thing is that they all connect up to this big idea. What's the mission of the site? It needs to make people feel this kind of way. So therefore they do these kinds of things, right? And if you
Yeah.
can define that, I think that's important. Corey, you may want to build on that and talk a bit more about how we do that from the beginning. And we could
Yeah.
continue using a website as an example.
When I look at a web page, I think about the narrative as you scroll down an experience. So you think the top all the way down. You hit them up front with that big idea. This is really where you're introducing yourself. Think of it like the doorway. This is you're welcoming somebody into your home, right? And so that's the idea. Like I think about that story structure and mood that I want people to feel top to bottom as they scroll down. Now, thankfully, today the web has changed. It's much more engaging and exciting. There's so much more you can do with animation and motion. And so that really plays into what we're telling you to do today. Like that's how you can build in soul, thinking about what you want people to get from this homepage that's going to make them do something. That could be the call to action. So very tangibly, one of the things I like to do is I've absorbed the brand. I've researched and I've really became like, remember I talked about in past episodes this idea of becoming a part of the brand, really
Mhm.
allowing yourself to get lost in the work. Well, that's the whole point. The reason why you do that is because when you're at this moment where you're actually designing, you're in this flow state. And so what I like to do is I like to think about the homepage. I think about the user coming to the page. What do I want them to get when they land here? And then I use that design language thinking about color. We talked about going into a Starbucks, the lighting. Well, it's the same
Mhm.
thing. Dark backgrounds, it's lighter backgrounds. So you wanted to start building up that visual palette to go along with this story structure. And so I really just do that simply by writing it down. What do I want them to feel at this moment when they land on the page? Um, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
that's yeah. So that you can add on to it. That's kind of the way I approach it.
Yeah, Corey, and I was going to say that you're excellent at this with regard to taking the ideas, the theme, the big idea, and
Yeah,
turning that into a visibly emotional experience, and that's what we're trying to get to. So, and that bakes, or what's baked into that is actually defining what those things are in the beginning,
yeah,
so that then the visual design actually carries out that story. So let's kind of give people some key tips here of how we do that. So if you're starting off a project, let's say Corey, you and I are starting off something together, we want to define those things. So we want to say, what is the big idea? And in many cases, you're going to get this from talking with your client, or even if you're designing this for your own brand yourself. You know what you generally are trying to communicate. It's one big thing, and you
yeah,
usually know the big thing you want people to do. And in many cases, that's to engage with your brand, engage with the website, click a button to go do something, give money, buy something, whatever that is.
yeah,
Start to think about what is actually going to make people go from point A to point Z to actually achieve that action. Now, in some cases, projects that we work on, Corey, often have audience research that either we've conducted or is delivered to us, which is really great because then you're hearing from the actual people that are using this what they want. That's golden. You want that information, and if you don't have that on your project, try your best to see if you can find it. Even ask people anecdotally that you know. Or maybe ask your client to do some audience research. The key is you want to know what things they're looking for and what mood they
yeah,
want that to have, right? And so then associate some words with it. I would encourage you to define even up to 5 words, maybe no more than that, of what are the ways to describe this experience. It needs to be, immersive. It needs to be pensive. If it's something that's serious, you want people to think. It needs to be celebratory. It needs to be exciting. It needs to be innovative. Just assign some words to it, right, Corey? And then now, if
yeah,
we're designing that, you can do a lot with those
yeah.
words, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like Joey said, as you get that list going, and really that's your guide. And so then you start associating those key visuals that really capture that in your piece. And that's one part of it. It's the image gathering, but also thinking about the tone of how things feel on scroll. So, like when you're scrolling through an experience and something gets served up to you in emotion, the speed in which it comes in, the timing, all of those different things play into creating an emotional trigger for your audience or user. And so it's really, really thinking deeply about every decision you make as it relates to how you want somebody to feel, from the language to your image choice to the hierarchy in your typography, all caps, bold. We talked about Nike, this active looking typography. Well, you're thinking about all of those visual triggers that relate to design fundamentals. And that's what you want to approach the work with, the mindset of thinking about that along with your storytelling features. And yeah,
Yeah.
Joey, we we talk about this on every project. Like, I love this idea of script writing, associating words, because it just makes the work fun. It makes you feel like there's like a deeper kind of meaning behind it, and that's really that soul.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the way you might be able to do that today would be to think that through. Like I said, create the big idea, assign these attributes or these descriptive words to it, and then building on this a bit, Corey, just to kind of give people a few more steps.
Yeah,
I want to note one thing that we have heard from some people uh, from the video and just in our network in general, that some people are just frankly burnt out. They're not excited about the project. We talked about
yeah,
that in other videos. What do you do in that situation? It's sometimes hard to create soul, which is a motive, or find the soul when you just aren't excited in general about the project. How might we do
yeah,
that? And so one thing that I think is a tip that we often will employ, which is to really, Corey, you've touched on this in other videos, really getting into the mindset of the project, the mission. And I want to build on that even more. the people. So we talked about the audiences here. Try to turn them into real people, or like I said, talk to real
Oh
people.
yeah.
Go watch videos of people that are in that same audience group. Try to really hear and see and listen and look at pictures about who you're communicating with. And that may be very different, right? If you're working for a nonprofit and you're doing something very heavy, this is going to be, frankly, a heavy experience. You're going to be
Yeah.
consuming the problem and understanding that. If you're selling a product and people are buying it out of excitement and they're waiting in lines to get this new product, that's a whole different set of emotions. But you got to let yourself get into those emotions so that
Yeah.
you can then walk through the steps that would make people buy this product or take this action. And if you can get yourself emotionally connected to those actions, right, Corey, the soul starts to
Yeah.
come alive and you can start to imagine what emotion is making me want to consume this. And I think that's really important. So really trying to embody the audience's view on what's happening.
Absolutely. And, I understand that it's really hard for certain subjects, or maybe when you are feeling emotionally burnt out or not really invested in the project. But, like I said, it is a responsibility being a designer. And if you can find a way to prioritize what is the impact of the thing you're making on the end user, and try to channel that energy. But, we get it, we're burnout sometimes too, and sometimes one of the things I like to do is step away from the work altogether. We do this in a lot of different ways. We take a walk, or sometimes walking away from the project adds just as much value as trying to stay in it. And actually, often it's more, because your subconscious never stops working for you. So sometimes just taking yourself out of the process a little bit could really reel you back in, to make sure that you're able to kind of get back on track, and try to find or channel that inspiration, to really pick it back up. I
Yeah.
don't think that's something we don't talk about a lot, Joey, but I think it's really important to think about how you're personally feeling when you're engaged in our project.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really bringing your person and
Yeah.
your mindset to the plate and your emotions as much as you can. Uh,
Yeah.
that's great. Hopefully these points have helped people. I want to take a moment now just to ask you, if you're liking our content, feel free to like, subscribe, click the bell so you get all the notifications. Because we're talking about conversations like this on this channel, and we would love for you to get those notifications and be part of it with us. But Corey, as we wrap up this particular
Sure.
conversation about soul, this certainly won't be the last time we talk about it. It does make me think about some next steps that people could take. So we've already outlined a few of those actual next steps. Again, whether you're working on really any kind of project, you can do these three steps: the big idea, assigning some attributes to it, and thinking about the people that are actually going to be using it. Try to get into the headspace that they
Yeah.
are in, hear, see, feel what they're feeling. And then we think those three things can help you really build soul into whatever you're making, design or beyond. But then one thing you just said, Corey, that I think we can leave people with is stepping back and really not taking the work so seriously at that moment, and
Yeah.
really thinking about the end goal. So, Corey, I would like to wrap with something you just said, that idea of the
Sure.
top of a web page. Yeah, it's the top of a web page and it can be seen as a functional thing. But some of the things that we've worked on together and I've seen you design are beautiful. They encapsulate a moment. They help you step back and say, that was the end goal. We made someone feel, and that is what it looks like. And I
Yeah.
think about that when you're starting out, of what that's going to feel like to actually create that moment for someone and how good that's going
Yeah.
to feel.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great thought to actually hopefully find that soul within you.
Absolutely. So we're here to help. We want to hear from you. We want to know about what are the things you're struggling with. This whole channel is really just to help you stay motivated, stay inspired, because we are here to help you take your career to the next level. So we really look at those comments. So feel free to drop comments, send us a note, let us know what you want to talk about, because that is what this channel is for.